So in this lesson we're going to start looking at lenses in a bit more detail. We're going to specifically look at how ray diagrams work for lenses. So kind of like mirrors, there are two general types of lenses that we deal with. One of them is what's called the converging lens. It happens to be the convex lens, where the convex mirror was the diverging mirror. And so what's true about the converging lens is that if we have C1 and C2, these are the centers of the spheres whose surfaces are a part of the lens. So if we were to continue, this surface around, this is the center of that sphere, kind of like with a mirror, the line that we draw through the center of curvature of both of the sides of the lenses is what we call the principal axis. So there we have my principal axis, or the line that's normal to the lens. What happens with parallel light rays is that they actually get refracted toward a focal point. Since light can travel equally well in both directions, there are actually two focal points for the lens, one on the right side and one on the left side of that lens. What would be true is if you have light rays that travel through this focal point, they get refracted parallel. So let's look at some ways to find the image from a converging lens using a ray diagram. So the rays that we're going to use, we can do one ray that is parallel to the principal axis before it hits the lens and then refracts through the focal point. We can have one that goes through the focal point and refracts parallel to the principal axis. And the last one we could do is one that refracts right through the center of the lens. If the lens is thin enough, what this means is it's going to continue to pass through the lens unchanged. If we actually work out the indices of refraction in here, you'd find that it gets bent this way and then gets bent back that way. And so it actually passes through unchanged. So let's look at an image found, or an image for an object that's placed outside twice the focal length. And so my first ray will go parallel and then refract through the focal point. My second ray will go through the focal point and refract parallel. My third ray goes right through the center of the lens. And so there would be my image. How I could describe this image is real, inverted, and diminished. The thing that's different with lenses than mirrors is that real images happen on opposite sides of lenses as convex, or as the object is, So a real image for a lens is on the opposite side of the lens. A real image for a mirror is on the same side of the mirror. So there's the distance of the object, there's the distance of the image, and that's the focal length. It's worth pointing out that that mirror equation also works for lenses. We'd also call this the thin lens equation, and we'll get to that in a little bit later. Let's put the object exactly at twice the focal length and see what happens. So we draw our three rays. There's parallel, refract through the focal point, refract parallel, straight through the center, and you get an image that is real, inverted, but the same size. We can come up with the same three variables and the same relationship holds true. Let's put the object between f and 2f. There's my first ray, there's my second ray, there's my third ray. What I have is an image that's real, inverted, and enlarged. There's focal length, image distance, object distance, and it's worth pointing out that that equation holds true again. Let's put the image right at the focal point, or the object right at the focal point. First ray, second ray, and I can't draw a ray through the focal point that touches the lenses. The blue and the red rays are never going to converge. Image is at infinity, or image does not exist would be a way to talk about that. F, DO, well, F and DO are the same, so you could see right away DI can't exist. And let's put the object inside the focal point for the converging lens. So there's through the exact center of the lens. There's parallel and refracted through the focal point. And there's in line with the focal point and refract parallel. Now it's worth pointing out on the right side of the lens, these three rays will never meet. But if we trace them back, they do meet on the left side of the lens, and you get an image that's virtual, enlarged, and upright. So virtual images for lenses happen on the same side of the lens as the object is. So we again have our three values f, do, and di, and that relationship would be hold true. So our second type of lens is what's called the diverging lens, which happens to be a concave lens. So to locate the position of an image using a concave lens, we'll use two of the following light rays. So what's true about a concave lens or a diverging lens is if rays strike parallel, they get refracted away from the principal axis, and they're in line with the focal point on the same side that the ray came from. We could draw a ray that goes toward a focal point on the opposite side, but when it hits the lens, it'll refract parallel to the principal axis. And the light ray straight through the center is still the same. So the only difference is your parallel light ray gets refracted in a way that it would go through this focal point on its side. Your ray, instead of drawing it through the focal point on the side of the lens the object is, you're going to aim it to the opposite focal point, and it gets refracted parallel. And again, you could trace these rays back to figure out where they meet. So let's put an image or an object in here and figure out what's going to happen. There's my first ray. There's my second ray. There's my first ray and my second ray traced backwards. They seem to meet. And it happens to work out the third ray also works through that location. So here I have an image that's virtual, upright, and diminished. And so the focal length in this case is on the focal point you're interested in is on the opposite side of the lens. So here's a quick chart which kind of goes through all of the possible situations. It's worth pointing out that these are really the same possible situations as a mirror, except flipped concave and convex. Otherwise, all of this is the same. Object location, virtual or real image, inverted, enlarged. Real images are always inverted. Virtual images are always upright. There's a situation where the image is formed at infinity. So this is a good table to have in your mind, and it's also good if you add mirror type over here and just go concave, 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 convex, or converging mirror lens, diverging mirror lens. You could actually expand this chart to be a mirror or lens. I would suggest you pause it and copy down this chart right now. I'll stop talking for about 2 seconds to give you a chance to pause it. So the next situation that I want to look at is the human eye. And the cool thing about the human eye is that if you look at the lens in a human eye, there's some interesting things that happen with that lens. On the outside edge of your human eye, of the part of the eye that we see, is what's called the cornea. The cornea is basically a thin layer of keratin. It's made out of similar stuff that the outside of your skin is made out of, but it's clear. The iris is the colored part of your eye. So if you have blue eyes or brown eyes or green eyes, that blue, brown, or green part is colored. It's worth pointing out that the iris of your eye can expand and contract to let more or less light in. If you're in a really bright environment, your irises should expand and your pupils should contract or constrict. If you're in a very dark environment, your iris should contract and your pupils should expand to allow less or more light into your eye. You have your pupil, which is really the opening in your eye. It looks black, but the reason why it looks black is that there's no light coming from the back of your eye. Your pupil is actually clear. It goes straight through to the back of your eye. So really, that's what the color of the back of your eye is, or because there's no light that reflects off the back of your eye. And then you have a lens in your eye. And this lens is actually what helps create the image. And the cool thing about this lens is when it creates an image on the back of your eye back here, there are cells called rods and cones which convert that image into an electrical signal, and that signal gets sent down the optic nerve to your brain, and your brain then makes sense of that signal. Rods tend to be more sensitive to brightness. So rods tend to be sensitive to dark or light. Cones tend to be more sensitive to color. And so when you see color, you're activating your cone cells of your light. If you're just seeing is something light or dark, you're just activating your rod cells of your light, of your eye. What's true about the rod cells is it takes a lot less light energy to activate them than it does for cone cells. So your night vision is almost primarily based upon your rod cells and not your cone cells. It's part of the reason why you can't see color very well at night, is that the cells that you see color with don't get activated during night. So your retina is the place where this gets where this image gets refracted to, and then you have a ligament which holds your pupil. And there's actually a cool thing that happens with our ligament that holds the lens of your eye. There's actually a really cool thing that happens with the lens of your eye. One thing to notice is that as this object moves closer, the lens is actually changing shape. So these ligaments can stretch or contract the lens in a way that it changes the focal length of your lens. What this means is it allows your eye to focus on objects that are fairly close up, but also fairly far away. Now, one reason for, say, older people needing reading glasses is that this ability in older people has been diminished, either because the lens of their eye has become less flexible or the ligaments that do this have become less strong. So in, say, older people that require reading glasses, a lot of times this process is not as done as easily. This is what's called accommodation. Now there are some other weird things that can happen with the eye. One common problem with the eye is what's called nearsightedness. It's probably the most common eye problem that exists. It's also called myopia. And what happens in nearsightedness is when you have light from a distant object, your lens of your eye is shaped in a way that the lens cannot be changed enough for that light to fall on the retina. And so the light gets focused in front of the retina, meaning that you don't get a clear image of what's far away. So how you correct this problem is you put a diverging lens in there. What this means is that light rays get diverged before they get to your eye, and they get converged by your lens and actually fall correctly on the retina. Now the second common eye problem is what's called farsightedness. So these are people that can see far away objects well, but not close objects. This is what's also called hyperopia. And so what's true with light from a close object is that your lens can't be stretched in a way to change its focal length enough to focus that light on your retina. The light actually is going to form an image behind the retina, and you get an unclear image on your retina, meaning you don't see it very well. So the correction, you put a converging or concave lens to help converge the light before it gets to the lens in your eye, and then the light can fall on your retina and you can see the image. Now there is a third common eye problem called astigmatism. I happen to have astigmatism, and what that really is it's a irregularly shaped lens in your eye. So the correction for that is to have a corrective lens that is irregularly shaped in a way that matches the irregular shape of the lens of your eye. As you can imagine, that requires a little bit more detail than just making a converging or diverging lens. So that's kind of a quick overview of lenses and how lenses work and how you can use ray diagrams to predict image location from lenses.